I'm sure you've heard the news recently that if you travel abroad with your Naira card, that's your Naira debit card, you can actually spend it without even having a single dollar in your bank account in Nigeria. I mean, it's as easy as whenever you're traveling, just take your regular debit card, whether it's your GT card, your Zenith, Access, Sterling Bank, whatever bank that you use, just go to any merchant abroad. Maybe you're shopping in the mall or you want to buy coffee at Starbucks. You can basically pay with your Naira debit card. If you haven't tried that before, I'm sure if you ask a friend or a family member or anyone who's traveled recently, they will tell you that it's possible. It does come at a cost because they probably will charge you slightly higher exchange rates and some fees just for the convenience of you having to do this without even having a single dollar in your account. Now, this was the case in Nigeria several years ago until 2016, 2017 happened. In 2016, Nigeria went through a recession because oil prices collapsed. And for that reason, we couldn't spend our debit cards and Naira cards again. And then everything just went haywire. On today's Money Brief, I'm going to explain to you why you can now use your Naira cards abroad, why you can spend using your Naira cards abroad. That's your Naira debit cards abroad. All right. So back in 2016, 2017, we faced what we call a recession, a double whammy of a recession. Oil prices crashed and foreign investors essentially fled Nigeria. And for that reason, exchange rates went haywire, and the central bank, in order to control rates, essentially just introduced capital controls. And capital controls meant you couldn't move money outside of the country as much as you did. And so we now had a huge disparity between the official exchange rate and the black market rate. And for that reason, a lot of merchants abroad, a lot of companies who are involved in international money transfers and spending couldn't allow Nigeria to access that global market. And even banks also faced pressure because a lot of their reserves, a lot of their dollar denomination reserves also started to dwindle. And to make it worse, there was a huge disparity in exchange rate and exchange rate volatility. So for that reason, we couldn't spend our Naira debit cards abroad again. Yes, we used to do it before 2016, 2015. Even got so bad that even to use a dollar-denominated debit card issued in Nigeria became even extremely difficult. And then things started to improve again in 2018, 2019, when the exchange rate was stable. If you all remember, we had an exchange rate that was around 360 to the dollar for over a year. And then we could then use our debit card, our dollar-denominated debit cards issued in Nigeria abroad without hassles. But we still couldn't really use our Naira card as freely as we did before 2016, 2017. And then just as we were cruising and enjoying it, COVID-19 happened. And when COVID-19 happened in 2020 and we had that lockdown, we then could not also use our Naira cards again. And then things became really bad because the exchange rate then went from about 360 in the parallel market to about 700 Naira or 750 as recently as 2023. And then again, we couldn't use our Naira cards at all. In fact, a lot of banks started placing restrictions on how we can use our dollar-denominated cards. Remember, your dollar-denominated cards is backed by the dollars that you have in your domiciliary account. But even at that, they didn't really care. Even if you had $100,000 in your domiciliary account, there were restrictions to how much you could spend outside of Nigeria with your local dollar-dominated issued cards because of the challenges that we had with the exchange rate in Nigeria and the capital controls that was in place by the then central bank. Then came in 2023, we had a new central bank, governor and deputy governors and officials, and they decided to change how things were working, decided to go a different direction. They decided it was time to probably let the exchange rate free and let the market determine the price. And what happened was we saw the exchange rate go from 750 to a freaking 1,800 Naira to the dollar. Now, their game was that if you allow the exchange rate to freely float, at least to a large extent, then at some point it will find its level and find some kind of market-driven stability. And we seem to have achieved that stability since last year, because between early last year, between about May last year and today, we're seeing the exchange rate, today being September 2025, we're seeing the exchange rate stabilize between 1.5 and 1.6. It's just always been within that range. And so that provided some kind of confidence to investors and even Nigerian financial institutions, so much that we now have dollar liquidity improving in Nigeria. So dollar liquidity improving means that the banks in Nigeria now have dollars in their bank accounts or in their vaults, and there were no restrictions again to dollars that you could access. So you could access dollars that you have in your bank account without stress. If you go to the bank now and tell them you want to withdraw $10,000, they will give you a $10,000 without stress. This wasn't like that 2 years ago because we had all sorts of restrictions. So with dollars in the bank account, a lot of banks are now confident to issue or to allow you use your Naira debit cards abroad because, hey, it's a lot of money for them to make as well. Each time you use your Naira debit card abroad, they charge you an exchange rate that is typically slightly higher than the official exchange rate here because the bank needs to make a little bit of margin. And they probably also charge you some fee as well for using your card abroad. And of course, the merchants over there also charge you fees. Like I mentioned, these fees are not cheap, as you can see on the screen. Not really cheap. The last time I tried to use it, it was pretty expensive. But the fact is that when you travel, you can now use your Naira debit card abroad without hassle. I mean, think about it. You can go into Starbucks and you want to buy coffee. You don't need to have a dollar-denominated debit card. You can just use your Naira card. Yes, the same Naira card that you use for your ATMs in Nigeria, you can basically use it in Starbucks abroad or in Macy's or anywhere that you like to shop, even your hotels, because most of these cards all work with the likes of MasterCard and Visa. And so these are all globally accepted issuers. And so for that reason, you can use your Naira card. Now, what happens behind the scene is not really a concern because basically the banks behind the scene know how they settle the exchange rate differences. So that is why most times they tend to charge you slightly higher than the official exchange rate or the prevailing exchange rate, and sometimes also charge you some fee. Now, is there anything that the CBN has done that perhaps made this possible? Well, yeah, like I mentioned, it is because we have this new exchange rate policy that in a way allows the market to determine its price. But it's also important to mention that this is very possible because we don't have the sort of exchange rate volatility that we used to have before. Exchange rate volatility means today is 1.550, tomorrow is 1.6, next tomorrow is 1.650, and on and on and on. That creates unpredictability. And when there is unpredictability, there's no way you can have any kind of stability, and people cannot plan, and things like this can't work at all. So yes, while the CBN policy has helped push this forward, the fact that foreign investors are also bringing dollars back into the country has also helped. And of course, we also have a lot of those speculative demands that we used to have before. It has also reduced drastically. And so these things have contributed to us having exchange rate stability. You can't spend your Naira card abroad if we don't have exchange rate stability. Exchange rate stability is the first step. And then, of course, exchange rate liquidity is the second and very important step, because exchange rate liquidity, like I mentioned earlier, is banks having dollars in their vault, in their accounts. They have liquidity, and so they can back whatever spending you make in Naira by the dollar equivalent here. So if you travel abroad and then your limit allows you to, say, for example, spend 2 million Naira from your debit card abroad, or 1.5 million Naira, let's use that as an example, from your debit card abroad, it means the bank has the equivalent in dollars here, which is maybe slightly 1K or $1K dollars, or slightly lower than $1K dollars, something like that. So they have that they can back up. And so for a lot of Nigerians who use a debit card abroad, you also notice that you have limits. So depending on your bank and the kind of accounts that you have, you probably have limits that you can spend. Some can spend 2 million, some 3 million, some 1 million, some even less than 1 million. So it all depends on your limit. Does this mean you don't need to carry your domiciliary dollar account? Well, I think you can carry your domiciliary dollar account, because if you do, the charges that you pay is only limited to the regular ATM charges. It's dollars you're spending, and so there is no exchange rate going on, and so it's probably cheaper for you. So, but that can only happen if you have a domiciliary account in Nigeria. A domiciliary account basically is a dollar or a foreign currency denominated account that is in your name, and they would often issue you with a debit card. So with that debit card, you can now use it to spend abroad for and buy whatever it is that you want to buy. It's your money you're spending after all. There are limits sometimes that the banks do place, and sometimes you might need to call the bank to tell them you want to spend with your card. And that's understandable because of fraudulent activities, or maybe somebody using your card abroad. So the banks would have to open that card for you to use it abroad. They know when you're spending a card abroad, because once it hits a merchant abroad or an ATM abroad, it hits them here and they know that it's not been used in this jurisdiction. Now, something else I must add before I go. Can you use your Naira debit cards online here in Nigeria without being abroad? I haven't done it before, but I did hear that it works for some cards. So there are some cards, depending on the bank and the limit that you're given, that can allow you pay for things online with your Naira debit card. So before now, you could only do this with your dollar debit card because you have a DOM account. In fact, at some point, it was almost impossible. You couldn't even do it. So you need to find someone to do that for you abroad. But now these things are all fairly easy because Nigeria is gradually being brought back into the international community for foreign currency payments and transactions, which is really, really a good news. Yeah, so this is my money brief for today. I hope that I've been able to break this down. If you have further questions or comments, or even have a better idea or better explanation to what I've just said, you can drop it in the comment section. Until we do this again, do have a profitable day ahead. Bye.